All right, we're here once again for Football Reports episode 7. I can't believe we're already headed into week 7. Obviously, we still got a game going on tonight, but it's getting a little late on the East Coast, so we figured we'd knock this out before it got too much later. We don't want to keep you guys up till midnight or anything crazy like that. But let's go ahead and get right into last week's games, or I guess what's left of this week, technically. So let's start with the first game of the weekend, Seattle versus Orlando. This actually turned out to be a closer game than I expected, but let's go ahead and start with Michael. What were your thoughts on this game?
This game was actually went exactly how I thought it was going to go. I mentioned in my preview the week before that I think Orlando was going to be much, much closer to Seattle than people were expecting. It might even pull up the upset. In this situation, this is exactly what happened. Orlando's playing much, much better. They still have some holes on defense. But I think Seattle is kind of one of those teams that either plays to their competition or plays to their competition. I don't really think that it's not an and or situation for them, because if you really think about it, they played Houston so well, but they still almost lost that game, and then they played Orlando and kind of almost lost that game. Like, I know that they were ahead for most of it, but I think Seattle is kind of in that territory where they need to tread lightly and be very careful, especially when they start playing some of the tougher teams down the stretch. But I like the trajectory of Orlando's team, and I think they might actually get a win here in the next couple of weeks.
I certainly hope so. It would be better for the league if they did, to be quite honest. It would be better if Vegas could get some competitive juices flowing and start winning some games as well. Have a little bit more parity in the league. Travis, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought this offense looked a lot better than we've seen in weeks prior. I like them continuing. I think they should continue to play with Quentin Dormady as quarterback. And, like Sam already touched on, this was a very competitive game. And I think if Orlando would have came out like the team they are right now, week 1, I don't think they'd be 0-6 right now. I think, they would have already picked up a couple wins on the season, especially like if they would have played Vegas, how well they played this week. If they would have played that well a couple weeks ago, they could have probably beat Vegas too. But, it's interesting to see what they will be moving forward. Like Michael said, I think they will pick up a win at some point in the season. I don't think they go completely defeated.
Once again, I hope not, but we'll see. Mark, what were your thoughts on this game?
I would echo the same sentiments as the other two. I will add, just from a DFS perspective, I was surprised with. I thought he looked good the week before when he fell in the end zone with Devin Darrington, but he had that big run on the second touchdown and got another red zone touchdown. So, was really impressed with him. I think everyone kind of mentioned the same thing. Dormady really showed up for what he is, and on the Seattle side, I think something to keep an eye out for is Josh Gordon. Was he hurt? It looked like he was kind of in and out of the lineup, but I mean, he put up a zero spot from a DFS perspective. So I did have a little bit of exposure to him, and that hurt. And Ja'Cory Pearson was also kind of a letdown from a fantasy perspective. I think the game plan was a little bit different. So, and I actually even thought with the long week, they were going to work TJ Hammonds in the backfield a little bit more than Darius Bradwell. So I thought that was kind of a unique aspect that I was a little surprised they really stuck to, given his kind of a lack of involvement or inefficiency so far with the team.
That's completely fair. I thought that was kind of shocking as well, but looking at the stats, when you look at Devin Darrington, I mean, he's been fairly good, especially this week. He had 8 touches overall, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, actually averaged over 11 yards per touch. So pretty impressive. And then, like you said about Quentin Dormady, he attempted 44 passes, completed 24 of them, 243 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but also ran 5 times for 43 yards. So he also was pretty valuable in the run game as well. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next game at hand. Michael, did you have something you want to say?
I just wanted to mention the DiNucci turned the ball over again.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, but I mean, before we move on, let's talk about this. I mean, he's got what, 15 or 14 turnovers on the year now?
14 turnovers in 6 games. He has 3 red zone turnovers in the last 8 quarters of football. It was actually 6 quarters. So that becomes an issue. Because the game against Houston should have been a much larger victory for them. It should have been a more dominant victory than the 7 points that it was. But he threw 2 red zone interceptions. And then this past week against Orlando, he threw another one that was in the red zone. At some point in time, I know that June Jones runs this like run and shoot, run and gun, air raid style offense, but at some point in time, you have to think that this is hurting the team more than it's helping the team. I know that they've won 4 straight games and they're looking much better, but if you break down who they've won against, with the exception of Houston, Houston's kind of the outlier. It hasn't been their most strongest part of their schedule. So they have to look at that at some point in time, especially if he comes out and throws another touchdown, another red zone INT this week. I know I give DiNucci a lot of crap, Sam, and I know that you're kind of like, oh, he's going to get another shot at the NFL, and he very well may, but it's the turnovers are extremely concerning. So it's something that I think eventually June Jones and Jim Haslett needs to look at to possibly maybe try to get Montez worked a little bit more into this offense. Because right now it's hurting them, I feel, more than it's helping them despite the 4 straight wins.
I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's been basically holding them back. And at this point, you could even argue that it's made a lot of these games a lot closer than they really needed to be. Like you said, 3 red zone turnovers. That's adding up to a lot of points taken off the board for Seattle's offense. I mean, very quickly. And to clarify some of that, I think DiNucci's going to get a chance due to his experience with a certain coordinator. If it doesn't work there, that most likely he's not going to be back in the NFL, and we'll see him back in the XFL next year. But I am firmly of the thought that Steven Montez, however you want to refer to him, should have been inserted a long time ago. I personally thought he should have started from day one. He's a lot more mobile than Ben DiNucci, but there's a lot of questions about his experience level and what he can do in the pass game. I mean, he came out of CU. He hasn't really played much, if any, in actual live regular season snaps that count. But that's kind of why I wanted to see him in the XFL. I wanted to see him get that opportunity to show what he could do at the professional level, and it hasn't come yet. I think it will if Ben DiNucci continues to play like this, despite the fact that he's kept them kind of in the playoff race so far. But moving on to the next game, this game got embarrassing quickly. So this was the Vegas Vipers versus the St. Louis Battlehawks at home. The Vipers were blown out 29-6. What were your thoughts, Michael?
It wasn't close, which is what I kind of predicted to happen here, especially St. Louis coming off their second loss to DC, this time at home. And I kind of felt bad for Vegas because I don't think that there was a chance for them to start. I don't know what's missing with this team. There's something not clicking on the offensive side of this ball of the ball, and it's kind of got to the point where the defense can't keep up with it. I know that we talked a lot about the run game pretty much being non-existent, but John Lovett's kind of ran pretty well the last few weeks. But it's almost like they're afraid to run the ball. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter if it's Luis Perez or Brett Hundley. Neither one of those guys look comfortable in this offense back there. So I don't know what's missing or where it's coming from. And honestly, as much as I love Rod Woodson, it could be coming from the coaching staff as a whole. Rod Woodson may not have a grasp on how to try to fix this, and he's just trying to continue to hammer home what he knows. And it's just not resonating because this team on paper is one of the most talented teams that I think that we can look at. If you put this roster up against the other ones, you'd be like, that roster with no name or anything, that roster. And Martavius Bryant, like, for some reason, this offense is not running through him in the pass game, which is very weird as well to me because of how explosive he could be. I know you wanted me to keep this short, but it's just like I look at Vegas and I'm so confused as to why this isn't working. And it might be one of those situations, Sam, like I talked about in Travis, actually, I think you were on last week, where I talked about Arlington's offense and how they didn't lean into their strengths. I almost feel like Vegas might be doing the same thing, and they're not leaning in to the strengths of the skill position players that they have. So I just don't know if Woodson knows how to fix it at this point in time. It might just be good for them to try to salvage what they can and regroup for next year.
Quick update on the XFL game going on currently. There is 1:57 remaining. Houston just scored a touchdown on a quarterback sneak. They have brought it within 11 points. They're about to go for the extra point. So they're closing within 2 scores. There is still an outside chance that they could come back, but it will take quite a bit for them to get there. Travis, what were your thoughts on the Battle Hawks versus the Vipers this week?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Michael said, there was never really a point in this game that felt that competitive, that felt like Vegas truly had a chance. It just felt like the Battlehawks controlled the entire game. I think at some point it said A.J. McCarron had like 19 straight completions or something. A.J. McCarron was playing very well. You know, the way Brandon Silvers has been playing and how much Ben DiNucci's been turning the ball over, I mean, the A.J. McCarron MVP thing is gaining more and more traction every single week, according to a lot of different people, myself included. But yeah, just to echo the thoughts on Vegas has just been very disappointing. Like Martavius Bryant is not getting the production we thought. Geronimo Allison, who has a lot of NFL experience, has been almost non-existent some weeks. And for whatever reason, this Vegas team's just continued to struggle at all phases. And like Michael said, I'm not sure if it's the coaching or what is missing exactly, but, you know, I think they're not going to be able to figure it out in time. They still might pick up 1 or 2 more wins, but, you know, it's going to be back to the drawing board and see what happens next season for them.
Yeah, at this point, I firmly agree. I mean, you look at the North Division. I mean, they've only got 1 win. They're 1-5 at this point. Their season is over. I hate to say it, but they're at this point playing for pride. They're playing to be a spoiler, you know, and that's perfectly fine. I think that's more than enough motivation for this staff. I mean, they're a bunch of veteran coaches, a bunch of veteran players. So I don't think they want to lose, but at the same time, they are very much playing for next season. Mark, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've given up the most passing yards this season. They've given up the most rushing yards this season. I mean, they are last defensively in a lot of stat lines. And, you know, I do agree. I think Michael said it with it was either Michael or you said Lovett has really looked like the more efficient runner. And I would have to agree. I think he does look like the best back in this offense. I don't know why, you know, they're not throwing the ball effectively. So why not, you know, change the offense a little bit? You know, we're getting to that point where it is too late, like you're saying. And I don't know. I would be shocked if Rod Woodson came back next year. So on the St. Louis side, really no surprises on that front. I think A.J. McCarron is he's probably the only safe option at quarterback at this point in the league. And I was pleasantly surprised by George Campbell. I don't know what you guys thought about that, but he showed up, and it seems like he's starting to carve himself a role in this offense as we go into the second half of the, you know, later half of the season here.
George Campbell, Iowa State? Is that where he went to? For some reason, it's connecting with me that Iowa State. I'm not sure.
I want to say Landon Akers is Iowa State, but maybe Campbell is as well. I can't remember.
I know Hakeem Butler was, but for some reason I thought maybe George Campbell was, but I could be wrong about that. But regardless, no.
Florida State and West Virginia. Sorry, I was trying to look it up real quick.
That's why I recognize his name. Okay, Florida State. I'm a Florida State fan, so that's right. That's why I recognize it. Okay. All right. I was just wondering there for a second because he has bigger size than I actually thought he did. He's much bigger than I originally thought, for sure. But he's definitely emerging. Kind of reminds me of Chris Blair a little bit, just not as, take the top off the defense type of receiver.
That's completely fair. Quick update. Houston did not convert the extra point. Is still 37-26. They went for the 4th and 15 conversion. They did not get it. DC has the ball, 1st and 10. Just ran the ball for about 3 yards.
And Houston has no timeouts left.
That's another factor. So this game is very much nearing the end of the game. So anybody who's tuning in, we appreciate it. I'm sure we'll gain a few more viewers here shortly when the game does finally end. But right now we're talking about the Vegas Vipers versus St. Louis Battlehawks. And there was a couple points that I wanted to bring up. I really liked what I saw out of Darius Shepard this week. 7 receptions, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's obviously developing a rapport with AJ McCarron quite quickly. He's also a return man, so he had 15 yards on return as well. Awesome to see. He got a chance in the NFL this past year with Denver. So hopefully he gets another call up this next off season, given the timing of the XFL and everything that was working out there. AJ McCarron, 23 of 29, 236 yards, 8.1 per attempt average, 3 touchdowns, was only sacked 3 times. So pretty solid performance overall for that offense. And then as we just spoke about, the Vegas Vipers only ran the ball 13 times as a team. Let me let that sink in for a moment, because not only did they only run 13 times as a team, they only accumulated 43 yards. So dramatically less than 4 yards per carry as a team. I mean, you simply cannot sustain success with that performance. I mean, you're making your offense so one-dimensional that it's near impossible to defeat any other defense, because they know exactly what is coming every play. I mean, you're not going to run, and if you do, you're only going to get 3 yards. So what do they have to worry about? I mean, it's pretty embarrassing at this point. There needs to be changes made. I know they made the change at play caller. Maybe you just straight cut some players at this point and bring in new faces. I mean, I'm not really sure what to do. John Lovett has looked explosive at times. Rod Smith looks steady, but not explosive at all. DeAndre Torrey's had his moments, but nobody's really getting a foothold in this running game. So maybe you need to just put somebody in and stick with him. Give him like 20 carries in a game or something like that and just hope. But I really don't know what the formula is for Vegas moving forward. Moving on to the next game, though, we have the Brahmas at the Renegades, and Jawan Pass got his first start. But one subject we're going to be discussing in this game is that Kurt Benkert seems to be getting the majority of the credit for this victory, despite the fact that he came off the bench 1 of 6 for 2 yards and an interception. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Michael. I know you and I have talked about this a little off camera, and we're kind of the same thought here. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, first I want to point out Arlington again. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point in time, but this is another week where they didn't reach 11 points or 12 points or whatever it was. They're averaging less than even 11 points, I think, now a game. They scored 9. I've been really rough on the Arlington offense. I haven't chose them for your favorite segment. That might change tonight. Anyways, for the Brahma side of things and the Benkirk situation, I really honestly just kind of feel like that this was more media driven than I think XFL driven to kind of push this Benkirk situation because of his NFL experience and where it's come from. They were interviewing him on the sideline before he even got on the field. And I know that Jawan Pass hasn't played in a while, and I think that they kind of were wondering if he was going to end up kind of struggling a little bit, which, it wasn't perfect for him by any means, but I wouldn't call what Benkirk did necessarily good either. So I I don't know why they're pushing it. Maybe it's just to try to get the name out there because people might recognize the name a little bit better. I don't know if Ben Kirk is necessarily a name that's going to draw people in, but it was a very strange situation to the response to this this game with that quarterback situation. Because honestly, Jordan Williams was the MVP of the game, and nobody, or the kicker, and nobody really interviewed them as such. And I completely agree, Freddie, that pass did fine for what it was. It wasn't like spectacular. It was just, he moved the ball when needed. I think Travis, I think it was you at one point may have made a mention in the chat that San Antonio looked like they were a much better team with pass at quarterback. So I don't understand it. It baffles me. I think anybody on this planet that watches the XFL is going to probably be baffled by the Ben Kirk love, but I guess that's just where we're at because they're expecting Ben Kirk to start next week. So I don't know.
That would be my guess that he gets the start next week, just based on how everything's building up there. But I mean, also, I feel like they're kind of trying to play into his personal audience that had gotten pretty hyped up about him joining the XFL. And, now he's finally here. And don't get me wrong. I mean, he looked the part as far as like trying to how do I want to put this? With the visor and just the black and the yellow and everything, he looked tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, if you're trying to portray an image, that was great, but at the same time, you gotta follow that up with good performance in order for us to be giving you the credit for the victory. But quite frankly, you threw as many passes to the opposing team as you did to your own team. So let's cool it on the interviews until you do something worth mentioning. Right now, I don't think it's very fair that Juwan Pass didn't get that play. I mean, let's be real. I mean, that kid's been waiting for this start for how long? He's played in the XFL before. He didn't really get a chance to play before. He comes in, he finally gets a start after 6 weeks of mediocre to terrible play in the quarterback room, and then he finally gets here and he gets passed over. So it's just kind of crazy to see. But Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about San Antonio's offense struggling before, and this week we didn't mention, but they were also down. They're starting running back Kalen Ballage, who unfortunately tore his ACL, so he's done for the season. But yeah, I mean, their offense performed good enough to win this. A scoop and score, a fumble really helped them a lot because they only won by 6 points or 5 points. So I mean, that really was what gave them the momentum to finish the game out. But I'm interested to see what they do next week. How significant Cohen's injury is, if he ends up coming back next week, or if they, ride with Ben Kurt, or if, they do the 2 quarterback thing with Pass and Ben Kurt next week. It's interesting to see, but I'm interested to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I also am very interested to see exactly how this all works out. But Mark, what were your thoughts on this game, and who would you want on your squad out of these 2 quarterbacks going forward?
That's a tough question to answer because, I mean, I feel like Juwan Pass has a little bit more of the physical talent, where Ben Kurt, I think the one upside that he does have is, I don't know if you guys know this, but he's got a whole coaching course online that he's got a whole business outside of this coaching the quarterback position. And I mean, you see it, like he could definitely be like a good coach and kind of move up the ranks on that front someday. But he is so physically limited when it comes to in-game and even decision-making on the field. It's just not entirely there. So I would probably have to go with Pass just because of not only his rushing ability, but I would say there's a little bit more of a natural talent there. If Pass can just figure it out mentally, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you saw it on the broadcast. They were very clearly pointed out, like, guy couldn't even figure out the play clock at times. So maybe that's what's holding him back even just on the depth chart, in general. So I'd probably go with pass. And, the defense won the game for him. Not only Jordan Williams, but you had Delonte Scott, and Barku obviously looked really good again. So I think, we're going to see Barku in the league for sure. And maybe we'll see Chris join us here as well. And then on the other side of the ball, there was not really a whole lot to note. I was really upset. I thought they would incorporate Rennell Hall and get creative with him in the offense on the Arlington side of things, and they didn't. So I don't know what's going on there, but obviously with the news on the Arlington side of things, I think they've lost the locker room, quite frankly. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of players are upset that they're not opening up the playbook and moving the ball downfield and not taking as many shots. Just very conservative running the ball and a lot of short and intermediate passes. So it would be nice to see him get a little creative and kind of open up the offense a little bit.
I just want to mention something real quick. San Antonio is in a very precarious situation right now because of the injuries that they've had on offense. The team is not obviously healthy, but they're only one game out of the playoff spot in the South. And this quarterback situation needs to be figured out sooner rather than later for Hines Ward and the coaching staff, because they actually have a legitimate chance to surpass Arlington with how bad Arlington's offense is. And I don't think any team in the South is going to compete with Houston, but I think San Antonio right now is playing much better defensively than people realize. Jordan Williams, I believe, is leading the league in tackles. And if they can just figure out this offense and maybe score 18 to 20 points a game, I know they're the second worst offense in the XFL right now, but if they could just find a way to score 18 to 20, I think that defense can actually do enough damage that they might surprise some people. They just need to get this quarterback situation figured out, whether it's going to be Juwan Pass, who's been with you all year, or if you're going to switch to Ben Kirk. Because I think we've seen Jack Cohn. I think right now at this point in time, Cohn needs to go. But San Antonio plays Vegas next week, and Arlington plays Seattle. So it's a very, very good opportunity that we could see them come out of next week with the same record.
Very possible. Krish, what were your thoughts on the San Antonio-Arlington game?
Sure. So San Antonio with their quarterback situation, like Michael said, at Juwan Pass, he really, really struggled. His balls sail a lot, so he had no accuracy, really. His footwork is horrendously bad. I think that Ben Kirk, he throws a good ball. He really does. I really, really do think he's the guy there. Their defense played really well. I think that Arlington, they don't have a quarterback. They really haven't had one all season. I think it's time to give Kevin Anderson a shot. And much as I hate to say it, I really want to maybe see someone new in there. And I could see him bringing in a guy, but it's a point in the season where, to bring in a new guy to learn the system, like San Antonio did it, which I was really surprised when they made that move. But I live bet San Antonio when they were down 9-3, and they came back and won. So I was really happy, and yeah, I think San Antonio played a good game. So
Marquette King is trying to recruit Cam Newton, by the way, to Arlington.
He is 100% doing that on Twitter. So I'm just saying, if you're an NFL player and you want to highlight yourself and prove that you belong back in the NFL, is 4 games in the XFL or 3 games, whatever it is, 4 games because it'd be week 7. Assuming that he would play, I would guess that they probably push it off into week 8. He'd play week 8, 9, 10. But a 3-game, showcase of himself at the professional level is not the worst way to do it. But we got a couple comments from Freddie, which I really wanted to talk about. So let's get a 3-7 Orlando in there. How about that? Hey, there's a comment from the Dark Knight. Some men just like to watch the world burn. That's the definition of wanting to watch the world burn right there. So as we all know, Kyle Sloter was released. So let's go ahead and discuss that. First of all, Michael, you were not surprised by this release. Why weren't you surprised?
So, a couple different reasons. First, Slaughter at the beginning of the year kind of causing a little bit of a stir, liking comments and liking, Twitter posts and whatever else on, um, you know, about the USFL or teams playing or whatnot. But then on top of that, with just the Arlington offense struggling as much as it did, Slaughter just kind of never really seemed interested. I don't know if it was just because of how bad they were struggling, or if it was just he wanted to open it up more and they wouldn't let him do it, so he was frustrated. But his body language coming off the sideline was very, um, disconnected, disengaged. Uh, he I was going to mention all this as part of my segment, but it's just one of those things where it doesn't surprise me in the least bit that Slaughter ended up being the odd man out. I don't think he necessarily wanted to be there, and I think that he is probably just going to be better off suited trying to find another role somewhere else, because he showed flashes in the USFL, but even with the flashes as a Breakers fan, it wasn't overly impressive last year. It wasn't like, oh my God, this guy deserves to be, at the top of the chain. But I find it interesting that a majority of the USFL quarterbacks haven't translated to the XFL level. It's been very odd as far as like seeing some of that happen. Don't know if it's just because the play style is different or what's happening, but a lot of those guys have kind of just been like they're elsewhere now. A lot of the top guys we saw come from the USFL are not in the XFL right now. So I don't know if it's just the play style or what happened with Slaughter. His frustrations definitely could be that they wanted to open it up. I think Mark mentioned it earlier that the team wanted to open it up, or they lost that locker room. It's really disappointing with Slaughter because as a quarterback, you're the leader. We saw how Reed Sennett, handled himself on the sideline as a backup. We saw how even Ben Kirk this week, just coming in for 2 days, handled himself in his interview, where he was just like, "Oh, I'm just a team guy. We want to do it." You look at the De'Aaron King and Jordan Tiamu situation, and how much those two are feeding off each other, and how much success DC's having. AJ McCarron, and then you have guys like Kyle Slaughter and a couple other of the USFL transfers to the XFL level that just like weren't happy, and they just were causing more problems than not. I mean, even Quentin Dormady, who has no reason to show leadership skills, has been absolutely fantastic and has been wonderful. He's won me over as a big fan, and I hope he continues to have success, because he easily could have just been like, F you guys, I'm out, with everything that happened with him. But instead, he's coming back and actually trying to lead Orlando to a victory. So it doesn't surprise me. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see Drew Plitt for the rest of the year either.
It's very possible. Travis, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Drew Plitt definitely played better this game than Kyle Slaughter in this game than Kyle Slaughter. And yeah, like we knew about the gripes, week 1 or week 2, Kyle Slaughter was saying about, liking stuff on Twitter. And just like Michael said, I think he was kind of just done with the organization. I just don't think he wanted to be there anymore. So I'm sure he did, even though I don't think we've got anything official that he approached to be released or anything, but I would assume that he essentially requested his release, or at least, in some way, shape, or form, they didn't like his body language or he requested it. But yeah, so now we see Drew Plitt and Kevin Anderson on their roster. I'd like to see a little bit of Kevin Anderson, not saying that he should start or not saying that he's going to be given the reins, full time or anything. But Bob Stoops has shown, in sideline interviews that he's not impressed with the quarterback performance of Drew Plitt or Slaughter. So I think we could still see Anderson a little bit, but I think ultimately it's should be still Drew Plitt's job, unless Kevin Anderson would come in and do something amazing, or unless hypothetically Marquette King recruits Cam Newton to come to Arlington.
Hey man, it might happen. It wouldn't shock me. But Mark, what are your thoughts on this situation and how it's all unfolded?
Yeah, I think, the sideline interviews I thought were really kind of revealing throughout the season. It seemed like every time they either talked to Slaughter or even Cannella, there was a little bit of frustration with the coach's lack of, throwing the ball and taking shots downfield. So I think between those two, we saw a lot of tension between them and the coaching staff. I'm curious to see what happens with Canella for the rest of the season. I think he'll still be involved. I don't think they're going to be getting rid of him. But that to me, it seemed like it was almost a combination of both of them and feeding off of each other, a little bit of negativity in the locker room. And I wouldn't be surprised if Slaughter is one to speak up and kind of speak his mind. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of arguments or blow up after that game. So I would love to see Cam Newton come and play. I think everyone that is an XFL fan, like, this is kind of that opportunity to see a guy like that come off the street and put up some fireworks. I think that would be a lot of fun. We'll see if that happens. Yeah, I don't know if there's an ego that kind of plays a role into this a little bit here, but that would be something to see that with Cam Newton.
I would agree. I mean, even if you bring him in and you just use him as like a running thread at first, kind of like a Quentin Flowers type, and then you kind of work him into the passing game more and more as he learns the offense, and you essentially give him 1-2 starts late in the season. I think that's enough for a guy like that to, like I said, get an opportunity back in the NFL. Krish, what are your thoughts on this with Cam Newton potentially being a guy that Marquette King is recruiting and Kyle Slaughter being out?
Sure. So Cam is an idol of mine. I have a school profile in school, and it's a picture of Cam. I've always looked up to Cam since I was young. He's a role model for young kids like me. So I don't think he would play in the XFL. I think that he would have to be offered a boat. Like, Brett Hundley's getting paid, what, $200K, I think, a season? Something like that. And he would have to be offered at least $700,000 to even think about something like that, in my opinion. It would be awesome to see. I would love it. I want to see Cam. I love watching Cam play football, but it maybe not. I don't see it happening. I see them going after, bringing in another guy. I don't know who's currently available right now. I know there's a quarterback named Mitch Kidd. He's somewhere out there. Maybe they want to bring him in. I don't know. He needs to go to the IFL first, so we'll see about that. But I think that Arlington, they're rough. They're really, really rough. They have no quarterback. They have no – and see, I don't know why they won't use my boy Rennell. Like, Rennell is such a baller on defense, offense, anything. Rennell can play any position on the field. Rennell could probably play offensive line and he would be good. He's good at everything he does. And maybe that was a little too far. But no, I mean, I want to see them become more explosive. And with Slaughter, we talk about bring me the league of opportunity, right? Slaughter got opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, right? Like, we need to start giving more guys opportunities instead of giving the same exact guys week after week after week. Because he keeps sucking. He keeps showing that he's not good. So why are we giving him more chances? Is he magically going to get better? No. So that's my thought.
I think with Slaughter, it's very similar to like Juwan Pass and Ben DiNucci, in the sense of, like, you see these flashes of brilliance when he's on, but then you see the other side of it where DiNucci turns the ball over. Turns the ball over, and then you have Slaughter does a little bit of the same thing. It's just that DiNucci holds himself as much more of a leader than Slaughter does. And I think that that's why it looks so much more catastrophic with Slaughter than it does DiNucci, because DiNucci will make those mistakes and then just be like, on me, guys, my bad, let's go get him. And Slaughter, on the other hand, is like, oh, coaches, and the wind was blowing, and somebody ate a taco just as I was throwing it. Like, it just feels like his body language is him just making a bunch of excuses. So it sucks to see, because I did like Slaughter, but that's kind of where I think the reason why he's been getting these opportunities is because he has shown those flashes. It's just now those opportunities are probably not going to be as prominent now.
I don't think he's been a leader, and so I'll just add that. But I will say, I do agree with him. I do not agree with the play calling offensively.
Mark, Mark, I want to make it clear that I actually agree with him in the sense that Arlington's offense is way. I mean, I've been talking about it for weeks now. I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong of Sloter to feel that way. It's just that leadership part of it is where it's lacking. Like you don't want to collide with your coaching staff and whatnot. You want to work with them. Like you want to try to find a way to make it work to be able to open that offense up. You know, if you're frustrated, yeah, cool. Be frustrated. It's okay. Like Sloter is absolutely in his right to be frustrated with that, as is Sal Cannella and anybody else that's on that offense. Absolutely, because let's face it, that team that they like I said, what are they, under 11 points a game now? So I agree with you there, and I want to make sure I clarify that. It's just that there's a way to handle it, and especially at that quarterback position where you're under a white hot light, that it feels like Sloter just wasn't handling it.
It wasn't being accountable.
as well as some other people.
That's fair. I mean, that's definitely a fair argument when we're talking about Kyle Sloter. I mean, he is the type of guy where, his personality can rub people the wrong way. I mean, quite frankly, he's a gunslinger. He's got that mentality. I'm the best on the field, even if it may not be true all the time. And that's part of what resonates with some fans. That's part of what rubs fans wrong way. I mean, especially if you're losing and you're not performing well like he has in the XFL. I mean, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. You really can't defend that performance so far. So, I mean, yes, the Arlington offense has been just disastrous. It's so embarrassingly conservative. It's not even funny. And to be fair, I personally think Sloter did what was best for himself as a player to get out of there, because Arlington's offense is not suited for him at all. Never was, unfortunately, because I thought they were going to throw the ball a little bit more and stuff like that, but it just hasn't panned out like that. So ultimately, I mean, if you have to request your release or whatever it ultimately came down to, it makes a lot of sense. But where does he land? That's the question now.
I want to ask you, Sam, specifically this question, which is usually outside the norm of how we do this. And I know that you wanted to kind of keep this a little bit shorter tonight and stuff, but what are your thoughts or what are your feelings as to why it feels like some of the top USFL quarterbacks are not translating to the XFL in the sense of what we saw last year? I mean, is it potentially the play style being so much different?
I don't think it's play style at all. Quite
Okay.
frankly, if you look at the talent that came to the XFL, I hate to say it, but you took the cream of the crop from the USFL. You took basically the top level free agents that were open to the XFL that were NFL caliber, bottom end NFL caliber anyway, practice squad type guys who were finished the season on a practice squad, didn't get a futures deal, stuff like that. So quite frankly, they got a higher level of talent. And I think that's a big reason why we see this drop off from all the USFL quarterbacks across the board. And I hate to say that, quite frankly, because you guys all know I'm a bigger USFL fan than I am an XFL fan, but I'm inherently a guy who roots for the underdog. So that should tell you why, or a big reason why I'm a USFL fan over an XFL fan. So that in itself is all the proof you need that right now I think the XFL is ahead on overall talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you look at guys like Michael Joseph. I mean, he's been lights out for DC. You look at guys like Donald Payne, another USFL or all USFL player that came over, Darnell Sankey. I mean, I could go on and on. Trent Harris. I mean, guys like this that were just not in the USFL. I mean, they're fewer and far between in the USFL. So that might change in 2023. Don't get me wrong. They've added a lot of talent this offseason. But as of right now, I think that's really what it boils down to, unfortunately.
I was just curious because it seems like the other players at other spots have kind of translated all right. It just feels like it's that quarterback position going from the USFL to the XFL just kind of seems like it's just not working out for the quarterback position. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were. And Freddie brings up a good point. It could just be the coaching too. He mentions inexperienced coaches. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily call Bob Stoops inexperienced, but he's not really a professional head coach. I mean, he's had that the 5 games that the XFL 2020 had, and that's pretty much been about it for him as a head coach on a professional level. So it could be it. I was just curious what your thought process was because I know that you followed the USFL a lot more closely last year, and that you're a bigger USFL guy. So just was curious.
No, Freddie has a great point as well. I think that's part of the process as well. And like you said, Stoops was never a professional head coach before, the XFL in 2020. So in the USFL, it's a little bit different. Yeah, you have Mike Riley, who's been around the world of spring football. You've got Bart Andrews, same thing. That's been in every alternative football league known to man. Down the road, but at the same time, there might be something more to that I haven't really thought. I mean, if you look at it from the USFL perspective, Todd Haley didn't really have that successful of a conversion into the USFL. It remains to be seen how Ray Horton does. I think he'll do a little bit better because he's leaning more on spring league coaches to kind of run the team. And then, it'll be interesting. Mike Nolan, that's going to be a guy who's going to be really fun to watch in Michigan. So we'll see how everything pans out there. But the DC game and Houston game has finally wrapped up 37-26. DC is 6-0 heading into week 7. So let's go ahead and talk about that game for a little while. Mike, from what you saw, what were your thoughts on this game?
Houston's feisty. They're going to fight to the end. We saw it last week with Seattle. This game wasn't as close as the score indicates once again. Not because of any reason like DC came out and smacked him in the mouth and turned the ball over inside the red zone or anything like Seattle did, but it never felt like it was out of DC's control. Once they took it over from the pick 6, it was an unraveling I've never seen before. They threw the pick 6, they went up I think it was 9-8, and all of a sudden Houston was just making dumb penalty after dumb mistake after dumb penalty after dumb mistake. I have never seen anything like that in my life. That third quarter coming out of halftime was absolutely insane. Squirting water on the officials, low blowing a guy way after the play, fighting after another play in the red zone, and they still somehow miraculously only came away with a field goal in that entire sequence. And that goes to show the grittiness of a Wade Phillips defense, but I don't know. What we just witnessed there is probably going to go down in infamy because it's insane what we just saw. That third quarter specifically is something I've never seen in football before. The penalties and the mistakes after that with Houston, they shot themselves in the foot with that, as far as I'm concerned. But other than that, I don't think this game ever got out of hand for DC, and they just solidified themselves as the best team in the league, really.
There is no argument at this point. I mean, there was prior to this week, but there is none anymore. Granted, Houston did give them quite a bit of help in this game with 12 penalties, but part of what DC or makes DC so good is their discipline. They only had 3 penalties. So, I mean, you can argue that penalties helped, but you can also argue that DC having a lack of penalties helped. So, which weighs out more there? Travis, I know you have quite a bit of thoughts on this game. What were your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, DC went down early. It was 8-0 pretty early on, but then they ended up scoring 17 unanswered, and then, like Michael said, they controlled the game the rest of the way, never, gave back the lead in any way. And I mean, yeah, the Houston team just completely stalled that second and third quarter. And then we saw them have a little bit of life in the fourth quarter. They threw Cole McDonald in, who actually played surprisingly very well, trying to rally the comeback. So maybe he'll end up actually starting next week. We'll see. I ended up starting Cole McDonald on my fantasy because Jack Cohn was hurt, and Cole McDonald just probably ended up getting me a bunch of points because I think he threw for 2 touchdowns, didn't he? One of them being an 85-yard, huge play, like right when he came in. So, but the real thing about this DC team, like you were saying about how disciplined they are, they're so persistent too. They were down 8-0 early on, but there was no stress. There was no, infighting or anything like that. Just continue to work. Eventually the running game got working, but until then the pass game worked, and then everything was flowing together. The defense was clicking, pick six. They just complement themselves very well as a whole team. And I mean, that creates for winning football, being disciplined, being persistent, and complementing on all sides of the ball just is a winning formula.
I just want to touch real quick on Reggie Barlow, because I don't think he's getting enough credit, because this is his first professional head coaching job, I believe. And the great thing about Barlow that I'm seeing, and maybe it's because he has Fred Case as his offensive coordinator, Kice as his offensive coordinator, and Greg Williams as his defensive coordinator, but he's letting them coach. He is letting them do what they need to do, and he is present in every conversation, but he's not the center of attention, which is exactly what a head coach at this level should be doing right now, because then he can coach from behind the scenes. Barlow is doing a fantastic job, and I don't think anybody's talking about it. I mean, if they are, it's not nearly as loud as some of the other guys, but Reggie Barlow is right now, to me, the best head coach in the league at this particular moment in time, with how disciplined and how well this team is playing.
Once again, proof's in the pudding. Mark, what were your thoughts on this game?
I think anyone that follows the XFL knows that Lucky Jackson is a big role player on this team, and I think the world got introduced to Lucky Jackson tonight. So that was a really big game for him. He's been quietly producing for this team all season. But personally, I think he's kind of the unsung hero in this offense. He's really what keeps the passing game alive for this team, and it opens up all kinds of opportunities on the ground. So I think Lucky Jackson was the big storyline for me. That interception that Silvers threw, that was on him because I forget what the penalty was before that. Oh, they called it intentional grounding on the play right before that. And you can see he couldn't keep his composure, right? That's a big red flag for a quarterback when you can't keep your composure. And he zipped that ball way too hard when it came out of frustration. It went right over Bird. Bird, it tipped off his hand into the defender. Obviously, a bad play at the end of the day, but that changed the whole dynamic of the game. So if he was just able to kind of keep his emotions in check, that game could have completely played out differently if that one play didn't happen. So that was a big takeaway for me. And I think the coaches are going to look at that on tape, like Travis was saying. I would not be surprised if we did see Cole McDonald start going into next week. So I've been a big Cole McDonald proponent from the beginning of it, from before the season started. So would love to see him come back out there next week as well.
That makes, I think, all five of us. Chris, you're also a Cole McDonald fan as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we were all kind of riding that train before the season as well. I thought he's, been very exciting when he's been in there. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets more opportunities. Chris, what were your thoughts on this game?
Brandon Silvers kind of turned back the clock this game, back to Seattle Sea Dragons, Brandon Silvers. But, it was fun. I love Cole. I love watching him play. He's explosive. He made a crazy throw, across his body. That was insane with the defender on him. So he's fun to watch. He's physical. He's big. I think he'll start going forward. I think he should start. DC is such an amazing team. I mean, they're the best team in the league. They're the championship favorite. And I think the one thing that they have that no one else has is chemistry. They're clicking on all cylinders. On offense, defense. I mean, my boy Santos got a pick six. So happy. But everything is going well for them. There's not one thing off about that team. There isn't. And you look at all these other teams, they have 50 guys going in 50 different directions, aside from maybe St. Louis and maybe you can say Seattle, but even that's like shaky. So DC right now, in my opinion, is going to cruise to the championship with no one's stepping in their way. I can't see a team that can. I mean, maybe in the play, maybe St. Louis in the playoffs, maybe, but even that, it's like, I mean, Teamu. Look at how Teamu has improved week after week after week. Like, I watched Teamu today, and I was like, "Who is this?" Perfect passes, like so accurate. He's so incredibly accurate, and like De'Eric, like he's good, but Teamu's really stepped up, and I'm really loving seeing that. So.
My reaction, Chris, wasn't because you said that. My reaction, Chris, is because I'm a DC fan through and through, and until a championship game is played with DC in it, and this clock is 0-0-0, and we won, I will never believe that we are going to win a championship in anything. And that included when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. I did not believe it until like 2 days after the game ended. So I'm used to just disappointment. So
Freddie says Barlow is playing to what his strengths are at the moment. That's big, and that is 100% true. One thing that I wanted to bring up that I think is also not really be talked about quite a bit, and I know a lot of this comes because they're ahead often, so it makes it a little bit easier to get people worked in. But I believe the count was 10 or 11 different receivers were targeted tonight by DC. I don't know about you guys, but to me, it's always made sense to try and get everybody involved, keep people fresh, keep them explosive, but also keep them interested. You know, it's very important to keep players interested, you know. So if they're in the game, they're invested in the game, they're getting snaps, even if it's a snap here, snap there, whatever it may be, they're going to be a lot more energetic on the sideline. They're going to be a lot more invested in their wins, in their losses. So I think that's another smart move by DC because they've been getting everybody involved, it seems like. Whether it's offensive or defensively, we're seeing a crazy rotation on both sides of the ball, which has been incredibly effective so far. I wanted to point one thing out is, yes, Cole McDonald played very good tonight, 8 of 11 for 194 yards, a touchdown, 0 interceptions. He ran, I think, 6 times for 41 yards and a touchdown as well. But let's just look at this real quick. Prior to this game, Brandon Silvers had a 61.8 completion rate. He's top 3 in the league in touchdowns, and he is top 3 in the league in passing yards. And we are calling for him to be benched heading into week 7.
I'm not calling for him to be benched into week 7. I think it's a bit premature to assume that Cole McDonald's going to take over this game, over this job. But what I will say is I would not be surprised if Cole McDonald was getting worked in more in actual drives and not just red zone work, at least for next week, because Houston has pretty much wrapped up the South just because those other 3 teams are the bottom feeders of the league. So I don't think Houston wants to go into cruise control, but I do think that they want to add a new wrinkle for a potential championship game, assuming that they do get to that point where it may be needed to have Cole McDonald be ready in case, Silver struggles like he did tonight against DC. So, and to touch on the Reggie Barlow thing with the multiple players and stuff real quick, I think that it's just like Freddie had said earlier, and what I talked about earlier is coaching staffs leaning into their strengths. DC puts together packages for certain people, and then they actually use those packages and target those people. Unlike some of the other coaches that put packages in for people and they just continue throwing to the same players repeatedly. So that's the difference. As you look at the top teams, they're leaning into their strengths, where some of these other teams are kind of like going opposite of that. But I do expect Cole McDonald to see more action, though. I will say that.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it has to happen going forward, in my personal opinion. But let's really quickly back up just a little bit and go to our favorite segment of the night. I know we kind of already touched on this man quite a bit, but Michael has a couple more words to say about one.
That don't impress me much.
So this week, Sloter is my don't impress me much winner. I don't know if that's necessarily a trophy, but it has more to do with just the body language and lack of leadership side of things. I know that he's no longer in Arlington, and I know that we touched a little bit earlier that he had every right to be frustrated with Arlington, and he's probably doing what's best for him and his family as far as that's concerned. But as a quarterback, when I coached for high school and a little bit at the college level as a volunteer, one of the things you look for in a quarterback is you look for leadership, and you look even through the rough times, because not everything is always going to be perfect. So when you're struggling or you're losing or you're frustrated with something, how you handle yourself goes a long ways. And for Kyle Sloter, he really failed at this part of being a quarterback, because all eyes are on you. So everything is amplified. Everything is bigger. I compared him earlier to like the Ben DiNucci situation, where Ben DiNucci has thrown so many turnovers or struggled at times, and he has rebounded by being a leader, and the team believes in him. Mark brought up on the broadcast about how Arlington has kind of lost that locker room, and it starts at the top down. So you go from the head coach to whatever after that, and then to the quarterback when it comes to players. The quarterback should be rallying around his team. The quarterback should be working with his team to improvement. And Kyle Sloter just did not do that for me. So, Mr. Sloter, I know you're a free agent. I hope you get another chance and really kind of bounce back. But right now, that don't impress me much.
Don't think anybody is going to argue that right now. Again, 10 touchdowns to 15 interceptions between the USFL and the XFL. So definitely not very impressive so far. But now we're going to move on to our DFS picks of the week with Mark, our fantasy guru. Mark, who do you got for this week?
All right, so this is a little tough right now just because DraftKings decided to wait for this game to end tonight before they would actually release pricing. So we have contests, but no pricing at this point. So we're playing a little blind here, but I have to go at quarterback with the safest option out there. AJ McCarron, he's against Houston. For me, it's hard not to take him just because I'm most confident that he's going to see the field the whole game. So that alone is a huge benefit at this point in the season. He does lead the XFL in quarterback fantasy points, and we did see Houston obviously give up a lot of yards tonight. So gonna have to roll with AJ McCarron going into this week. Jaquez Patrick against Las Vegas. So he's likely still going to be pretty cheap. I'm expecting him maybe sub 6K, if not right around 6K. That's pretty inexpensive for a running back who's going to see the majority of the workload with Kalen Ballage, who's out for the season. Lucky Jackson at wide receiver against Orlando. Obviously we saw him do very, very well tonight. I do think he's going to get priced up. This was the last week we were going to see him under 6,000. We had a lot of our subscribers on him going into this weekend. With that being said, if we can still find him under 8K, I think he is still worth it. And that leads me to my last point. Cody Latimer at tight end. He's another player that just continues to be underpriced all season long, and he continues to produce. So especially with Quentin Dormady is finding Cody Latimer as well. If we can find him underneath 8K, I'd be inclined to take that. He's put up just as many points as Ja'Cour Pearson this year from a fantasy perspective. And we're talking about a guy that's likely $2,000 cheaper. So give me Cody Latimer in a, come from behind, catch up game script against DC here.
That's a good point. I mean, if you're talking about DFS picks and you want targets for receivers, tight ends, so he's going to get lots of them. I mean, he's basically playing like a wide receiver one from the tight end position, which is a matchup nightmare for opposing teams. I mean, 33 receptions, 395 yards, 3 touchdowns so far this season. Incredible performance by Cody Latimer, former second-round pick of the Denver Broncos a few years ago. Quite a few years ago at this point, actually. But moving on to
Sam,
Go
real
ahead.
before we move on, there was a response to, it looks like XFL Newsroom, XFL Renegades, and XFL PR on Twitter, where the comment was made was confirmed. Slaughter absolutely hated it there. He was shitting on the OC every chance he got during the in-game interviews, and rightfully so. And that comment was actually liked by Kyle Slaughter. So he has definitely definitely asked for his release, and again, rightfully so, based upon what we saw from that offense. So I just wanted to make sure to throw that out there in case you guys had not seen that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, if he can get in the right system, like I could see him being decent. He has a decent arm, so I hope the best for him. I don't know what other USFL team would take him. That's the thing. I mean, all the teams right now seem pretty set at quarterback, but maybe Houston, but they have three.
Houston.
Yeah.
That would be my pick. I mean, definitely, I'm right there with you. When you mentioned Houston, that's exactly where my mind went when it came to where he could land. I mean, how ironic would it be if Orlando took a chance on him? I don't know why they would at this point, but it would be kind of funny to see him end up there. But we have one more topic of the night before we get to our weekly preview series. And this is one that I wanted to pose to the group because a lot of people have talked about this. And I personally have my own opinion. I know I'm on the side of the fence, much like always. I'm on the underdog side of the fence. But should XFL leave Las Vegas after 2023? Michael, let's go ahead and start with you again. What do you think about this topic?
For me, I'm going to say no. I just wish that they had done something a little bit different here. I was a firm believer that I wish that they had as soon as Sam Boyd Stadium was considered unavailable to them because of the Allegiant stadium deal with UNLV and whatnot. Once they couldn't work that out, I wish that they kind of have maybe gone to a different location in Nevada and just labeled them the Nevada Vipers for right now. We saw it with the Arizona Cardinals. They were once the Phoenix Cardinals. You could easily have changed it later on without making it a big deal. It's nothing against Cashman Field. It's just that at 10K, you really limit what you can do. And if the XFL going into season 2 is going to hit the boots on the ground to really try to link the community with the teams, eventually they're going to have to find a bigger venue. And there's not a bigger venue in Vegas at this particular moment in time, unless they can work out something with Sam Boyd in the NFL. So, but at this point in time, no, I don't think so. They signed the 2-year lease. I'd like to see them hang out for the 2 years, see if they can get that stadium full at the 10K. But it's a nice little starter spot. It's limited. So eventually you are going to have to move. And I don't know if that means move out of Vegas or if it just means move somewhere else in Nevada and just rebrand your team just for now until you can figure something out with Vegas.
That's fair. That's fair. If you guys are tuning in right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We're trying to grow to 750 subscribers by the XFL Championship. One lucky subscriber who likes and comments on a video will get gear from their favorite XFL team if we hit that number by the championship game. So go hit subscribe on the YouTube channel right now. Help us get to that number. Let's get you guys some XFL gear. So Cashman is a dump. They got to leave, according to Mr. Pete Channel. And he says, get some good lawyers and try to get Sam Boyd. Yeah, obviously Michael was just campaigning for that as well. Obviously a solid choice. It's just sitting there. I mean, basically waiting to be used. Travis, what are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, I'm very much in agreement with Michael. I don't think they should leave, partially because I feel like just the problems of them leaving are going to be, it's going to be too hard for them to leave right now. So I just think they have to live out their contract. And like Michael was saying, hopefully by the end of it, they've established enough and they are packing the stadium. Unfortunately, Vegas got dealt with a weird hand of having some rough weather for like the opener and, the stadium not being completely like ready. It seemed like for the first, home game or two. They do limit themselves with the only 10,000 person capacity, but I mean, like we see at DC and Audi Field, I think Audi has like a 15,000 person capacity, and they're consistently putting 12, 13,000 in there. So I think they could still, Cashman, they're only consistently getting 6,000. So there's still room for them to continue to build the market there and for them to fill up Cashman. And then once they get to that point, hopefully their lease is done, and then now they can move to a bigger stadium. But I think for now they kind of have to stay.
I would agree. One quick note that I wanted to throw out there for anybody who's watching, anybody who's listening, the lease is paid for already, so they don't lose anything by staying. They lose something by leaving. So it costs them more. They have to go find the new stadium, potentially travel costs, et cetera, whatever it may add up to. Mark, what are your thoughts on this subject?
So, I mean, with that being said, you definitely have to play out the lease. I personally, in the long term, would like to see him leave. I just think that sometimes the XFL is so far ahead of the game as far as like setting trends and everything else that they looked at Vegas as a location that could thrive and be successful. But I see that like 5 to 10 years from now, not right now. So, like maybe San Diego, Oakland, I think would be a cool spot. There's a few different places that maybe you could go alternatively. With that being said, this is coming from a ticket sales guy. Like, if you only have 10,000 seats to fill the stadium, like, you can do that if you have a good ticket sales staff. I'm hoping what the XFL does going into this offseason is really look across the board at some of these front offices and kind of beef up their front office personnel. Start focusing now on some of the off the field aspects of the business. And I think if you can beef up that ticket sales staff, absolutely no reason why you can't fill up a 10,000 person stadium. I mean, I had a one client at the Tampa Bay Vipers who purchased 5,000 tickets themselves, right, across 5 different games. So they had 1,000 tickets a game. So you can get one sales rep to lock down that many tickets just off of one account. Think about beefing up a 10 or 12 person ticket sales staff. Easily can fill it up regardless of team performance, regardless of where you're playing at. So it really comes into investing in talent off the field now going into year 2.
Absolutely. I hadn't thought about Oakland. That's actually a really good solution in my mind. The stadium's still available. Go ahead.
I actually have a little bit better of an option, maybe. I just looked it up to double check to make sure, but why not Salt Lake City? The Stallions played there. They have a 51K, stadium that they used. Might be a little bit bigger than normal, but I mean, you have fairly big stadiums all over everywhere else, so it stays somewhat close to Nevada, and it gives a new area that's not an NFL market. Just a thought.
That's very fair. The Salt Lake Stallions did have some success there, so it would be interesting to see them go back to Salt Lake. San Diego makes some sense. Oakland makes some sense. They could go back to a couple different markets from the original XFL. San Francisco was a market back then. A couple other places. Tampa Bay, although we've seen how that goes, I think they'd avoid that again. Be interesting. I would wholeheartedly welcome them in Denver, just saying, but we'll see if that ever happens. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But Krish, what are your thoughts on this?
A market that stands out to me is Lincoln, Nebraska. They are big about their football down there. Now, I know they're big about their college football, but if they can get local guys there, I think they could have something. Maybe play at somewhat of a smaller stadium, not the Cornhusker Stadium, because that's way too big, but maybe play somewhere smaller. Like, you could get a good crowd out there. I think Vegas is such a big city. There's so much to do, and with the team not being good, that plays a part into it too. At the end of the day, like, people don't care how the team is doing. Like, some people don't, the diehards do, but I think that it's such a big city where it's like you have the Vegas Nighthawks right across the street. You have everything going on in the city, the clubs, the slot machines, everything. And then you have this team playing at this, the field is horrible. Like, I'll just say that. Their field, my public park has a better field than that. So it's really, really bad. It's in horrible shape. A lot of Division III football facilities are better than that. So I think they need to move out of it. But with their lease and everything, and the whole thing with the money, like they might as well just shut down a team and move to another city that will embrace them wholeheartedly. Because I know there's cities out there that they can go to and get 12,000 plus fans at a game. My one question is, aren't all these teams like based in Dallas, and then they fly to their home cities? I saw something like that on Instagram. Like they go from they start the week in Dallas, and then send every game in DC they fly. So that's another thing they should consider is somewhere close to Dallas.
That's fair. I mean, that's a fair point too. Just real quick on your Nebraska comment, the Omaha Nighthawks of the UFL played at Charles Schwab Field in Omaha. It is a baseball and football field that can be expanded up to 35,000 fans. It's normally 24,000 fans. So that's a stadium option for them there. Omaha has supported alternative football for a couple of years in the past before. In fact, with Bart Andrews as a head coach, ironically. But definitely just a thought. We got some other suggestions down here. Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Arkansas, Georgia.
I want to comment on some of those comments real quick, too, because Freddie, if you go up a little bit, the Stallions, I don't think that was necessarily a Stallions issue as much as it was just an AAF issue. AAF had a bunch of issues from the start. They struggled a lot. The weather I don't worry about because we have DC. We have Seattle. This time of year, the weather's going to be there. Also, we have to think of this logistically. Little Rock, Georgia, would put them in the southern part of the country. That puts them in the southern division aspect of it, especially when you're traveling wise. If they were to do that, I would say get rid of the divisions completely. But at this particular point in time, I think that if they're going to look at moving Vegas, they need to probably stay somewhere close to that region, which is why I had suggested Salt Lake, because that stadium is not being used right now. I don't believe. Or no, it is. It's Utah Stadium. That's right. Never mind. But regardless of it, it's still a situation where I think that might be a good spot for them to at least look at. If not, I don't know if California on a monetary level is the right play right now. One of the main reasons why they didn't return to Los Angeles because of how expensive the market was. I know there's some cheaper markets around. Like I'm sure you could probably look at Sacramento, as a possibility. I think UFL has the Sacramento Mountain Lions, I believe. So there's obviously a stadium there that could be used. But I think if you're looking, to kind of sit there on a Vegas front, I want to say stay somewhere in that region if you're capable, and maybe eventually you'll get a Colorado team, Sam. I mean, maybe eventually,
I'm betting on the USFL. They had the Denver Gold previously. I'm hoping by year 5, if they make it that far, we get expansion teams, and then I get a team in Denver, and then I'll go buy season tickets the day they hit Denver. And I will literally start passing them out to my friends to force them to go to games and watch the goddamn USFL. Excuse my language. But I might even have to send Chris some tickets so he comes down here and stops talking so much trash on the USFL. But that's okay. I guess we can finally move on to next week's games. Mr. Pete says, what about the Sun Bowl in El Paso? That'd be a little rough. 4 Texas teams. I don't think I could. 3 is too much to me, quite honestly. But 4, no. I mean, honestly, I like Salt Lake. I like the suggestion about San Diego, Oakland, although, like you said, California is kind of a hit or miss market. There's a reason why the Raiders moved. There's a reason why the Chargers moved. So, you know.
But there's also a reason why the Rams moved, right? So just because they don't fully support an NFL team doesn't mean they don't have enough for an XFL team.
That's 100% fair. That's 100% fair. And oh man, correct me if I'm wrong, but Oakland was a franchise in the original XFL, correct? Oakland, maybe I'm
I
thinking
thought it was Vegas.
The Oakland Invaders? No,
Yeah.
that's different. That's no, it was Vegas.
USFL.
They were the Las Vegas Outlaws in
Yep.
the original XFL.
And
Tommy Maddox.
I think
Memphis.
the problem, Tommy Maddox, yeah. I think the problem with Oakland right now is venue.
That's fair.
One of the main reasons why Oakland left was because the venue was falling apart. It's one of the main reasons why the Athletics are in a situation right now where they might be moving out of the city because it's kind of just a dying town at this particular point in time because the city apparently doesn't care about their sports teams. And San Diego is a very interesting touch or go spot because it worked for the AAF to a degree, but San Diego is a college town, so it's not a real heavy sports, area. There's people that there's certain like professional leagues that have teams there, but to achieve what you want, it's almost like San Diego is kind of limited in a certain spot as well. So you got to take that into account. At least the XFL has got to take that into account. Now, if they don't want to grow beyond a certain point, then San Diego would make perfect sense. But if they want to kind of keep some of these markets that are going to draw, and because I don't see them ever expanding to like 32 teams or anything like that. So some of the smaller markets may be, kind of off the table for right now until they can kind of establish themselves a little bit more. Maybe if they get to 12 teams, or even 16, if they decide to push it that far, you could maybe see some of those markets, but I don't think it's going to be an immediate, let's head straight to that area type stuff. I would love to see San Diego get a team. Don't get me wrong, but it's just I don't know if right now is the right timing.
Something comparable to Oakland is San Jose. That there's a lot of money going into San Jose right now. You got the soccer team there. I think their stadium is like a 15 to 20,000 capacity stadium, so it's right in the wheelhouse of an XFL kind of capacity crowd there.
Is it wraparound seating? Do you know?
It's the San Jose Quakes, right?
The
Quakes.
The Earthquakes, yeah.
Yeah,
the Quakes, yeah.
And that's one thing that's actually really interesting to me. That you bring that up. So, can we see the USFL and the XFL, one of these leagues, kind of become like the MLS? Because you've seen how the MLS has grown, and football is more popular than soccer here, obviously. So, it's like, can it become like that,
I think that the difference is football is much more expensive to run a league than the MLS is.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and you start looking at it from a logistics standpoint as well of that nature. Now, the other thing is, Sam, as we talked about Vegas, we felt like that Rock and Garcia, or Dwayne and Danny Garcia, picked Vegas because they are building a soccer stadium because they're going to try to get an MLS expansion team there. There is a possibility that might be what they're holding out for, because of the fact that Sam Boyd is in a no-compete situation. They might just be like, well, we can use the soccer stadium like we're using at the 20,000 seat arena at Audi Field in DC. So that is a possibility as well, that they might just be trying to keep their fingers crossed and hold their breath that by the end of the season next year that stadium's built.
That's a good point. That's a good point for sure. Let's go ahead and move into next week's preview and then go ahead and wrap this bad boy up. It's already been an hour and a half. We don't want to keep you guys too long. We've got a Friday night game this week, 7 p.m. Eastern, Seattle at Arlington. Michael, what is your prediction for this game?
I think Seattle's going to win this game because our score over 11 points. The final score of this game may be an absolute ridiculously lopsided situation. It could be something like we saw with the St. Louis game with Vegas last week, 27 to 9. I'll give them the 9 marker again.
That's fair. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
See, as he was saying that, I already had my score in my head, and he almost said the exact same score. But I'm also going to side with Seattle just because I don't believe in the Renegades' offense, and Seattle's been looking hot. And the score I was going to say is 26-10.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, pretty damn close right there. Mark, what is your prediction for this game?
All right, I got Seattle 23-15.
All right, basically all right in the same ballpark here.
I will point out the spread is it's only -4.5. So if you think Seattle's going to win, I would take that.
No doubt. Dang. I'm not much of a bettor, but this might be the week I start. Chris, what's your thoughts?
-4.5 is pretty good, but I'm liking the +4.5 for Arlington, and I'm gonna go Arlington. Or I'm gonna go Seattle, 14-12.
Okay. I could see Arlington's defense getting a couple turnovers there and keeping it very close. In this game, I'm definitely picking Seattle too, so we're gonna make it a clean sweep here for Seattle winning the game. I do not think Arlington tops 11 points. I hope Kevin Anderson gets some snaps, but I don't think that's going to change much for them. Personally, I think it's probably 23 to about 10, 12, somewhere in that range. So I'm right there with Mark. We got a couple more comments real quick. Seattle, easy. Though Arlington has a good defense and DiNucci is turnover prone, I actually have Seattle at -4.82. That Dragons versus Renegade home have the hallmark of a trap game. It definitely does. So moving on to next game on the schedule, we've got the San Antonio Brahmas versus the Vegas Vipers in their last home game of the season. It's the last time we have to see Cashman this year. 3 p.m. Eastern, Saturday, April 1st. Michael, what's your prediction for this game?
San Antonio is going to win this game somehow. I don't know how they're going to do it, but it's going to be like 18-12.
Their defense better step up if that's going to be the case. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I don't know why I've been so drawn to San Antonio, but I've kind of adopted them as my South team. So I end up riding with them a lot of weeks, even though sometimes it burns me. But I'm going to ride with them again here. Just like Michael said, somehow, some way. I don't know how they do it. I don't know, maybe Ben Kurt comes in and ends up playing well, or maybe, Jawan Pass has a couple big plays. I don't know how they do it, or their defense might cost some turnovers, but I'm going to say Brahmas win. Michael about took my same score I was going to say again, too. So I'm going to go with a 16-10.
Okay. We're pretty much all kind of having the same thought process on these games so far. It's typically been pretty good when it comes to the overall results of our picks. Mark, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I hate to feed into the groupthink, but I'm in the same boat as you guys. I got the Brahmas winning this game 22-16. I think they commit to the run and they run the ball efficiently against the worst team against the run in the league. So you can see Jaquez Patrick having a big game and Brahmas playing great defense as they have been. I don't think Vegas has enough receivers who have been efficient to keep up with that secondary. So 22-16 for me.
Chris, what are your thoughts on this game?
So I got Vegas winning this game. I think they're going to come out a whole new team. I know I've been saying that week after week, but I'm confident, my boy, and I think he's going to get the job done. And I'm taking Vegas 22-14.
22-14? Okay. Okay. That's completely fair. I mean, Vegas has scored quite a bit of points on offense this year so far. I don't think San Antonio's defense is going to necessarily have the firepower to slow them down or stop them completely. I do think this is going to be an interesting game. Like Mark said, you got a solid run game going against virtually no ground game. Actually, despite the loss of Kalen Balaj, I think it actually kind of played into their favor. Jacquez Patrick was fairly efficient this past week. So I think that San Antonio is definitely going to have just enough to beat Vegas, but it's going to be a higher scoring game than most people expect. I think it's going to be 24-21, probably a late field goal or score that takes this game. Moving on to the next game on the list, we've got the DC Defenders traveling to Orlando to face the Guardians, who have yet to get their first win. Saturday, April 1st, 6 p.m. Eastern. Michael, what's your prediction for this game? You got Orlando winning, right?
DC 34, Orlando 19.
Okay.
I think it's just a mismatch nightmare for Orlando, unfortunately. I think they're playing much better, but it's not. I don't see this as much of a trap game as it was with the Seattle game.
No, it's not a trap game at all in my mind. Travis, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think DC wins. I do think the Guardians are going to win a game at some point, but I don't think this is going to be the one for them, unfortunately. But I think they will keep it surprisingly competitive. So I'm going to go with a score of like 28-17.
Okay, Mark, what are your thoughts on this one?
I got DC winning 33-16. I think they're going to blow them out.
33-16, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a rough one. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be like really ugly. Like, I think Orlando players might actually quit after this, which they should have already, but, they might quit after this game. Not quit, but you know what I mean? Like kind of quit. Like, at this point, man, like, you're 0-5, y'all awful, bro. You can't do nothing. So, and you throw in the towel. It's over. It was over after the first game. I got DC winning this game. And they're going to score 40. I think it's going to be like 40-10. So,
I mean, after tonight, that's honestly not that scary to say, quite honestly. So
that's why I'm chuckling so much. It's because, like, even though it could be the most ridiculous thing we heard all day, it's still so believable. Like,
what was Orlando's score there? 40 to what?
He said 40-10, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to double check that I had that right. I'm not going to say their score 40, but my jaw about hit the floor when I saw Freddie put 20 points. 20-point spread. I've never seen that in a football game before. That is insanity. But I guess that's what happens when you get a 6-0 team versus an 0-6 team that cannot put points up to save their life. Wow, I am mind blown by that. But
where is that? Where is he seeing that?
That's his own formula.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is.
I don't see any lines out yet.
He had 5.34 on Brahmas and negative 4.82 on Seattle, and he's one of those guys that, like, I very, very highly respect his formulas and his analytics. So it wouldn't shock me here. So kind of crazy to see that big of a number, but I definitely expect DC to win this one as well. I mean, how could you not? I do think Orlando's going to be a little bit more scrappy than 10 points, but yeah, it's probably going to be like a 30 to like 17. But I don't know that I'm prepared to put a 20-point deficit in between those two teams at the moment. So judge me if you want. That's totally fair. Moving on to the last game of the weekend, we have probably the best matchup in my personal opinion. We've got St. Louis versus Houston. These two teams, after tonight's loss, look remarkably well matched. Michael, what is your prediction for this game?
I feel bad for St. Louis. I think that St. Louis is going to walk into a hornet's nest with Houston. Houston definitely felt like they could win this game against DC. They definitely felt like they were going to win this game against DC. And I think in the process of them kind of being blown out the way that they did, or at least controlled or dominated the way that they did, St. Louis is definitely going to walk into a hornet's nest in Houston. I think it will still be close, but I think Houston's going to take no prisoners in this game, and I'm going to take Houston in this game 29-24.
Okay, high scoring. It's what, 54 points? 53 points? Okay, 53 points. Freddie has Roughnecks by 0.4. That's crazy close. But he agrees that the anger factor could push them this week. Travis, what's your prediction on this game?
This is a really good game, but I just think the North is better than the South, so I'm going to go with Battlehawks 32-26. They end up pulling it off, and then all of Houston's losses are to North teams.
That's a great point. That was not something that I had considered, but yeah, that could definitely end up happening. Mark, what's your prediction on this game?
Yeah, I think I got Houston 23-22. I do think that defense is going to come out pretty upset. They might go up early, and St. Louis is trailing later on in the game. I do think that Houston's DBs got exposed tonight. So especially Ajane Harris, that was kind of revealing. And I don't know if you guys saw, but the news on Marcel Aitman, he's going to be back this week as well. So that receiver group is getting even healthier.
Absolutely. That is definitely good news for St. Louis and AJ McCarron. So was that Houston or St. Louis? I'm sorry.
Houston, 23-22.
Gotcha. Just wanted to double check on that. Krish, what is your prediction for this game?
It's going to be a great game. I got Houston winning. It's going to be a closer game. I think it's going to be like 31-25. I think AJ is going to have a decent game, probably 2 touchdowns, a pick, a fumble like he always has. And then I think Colt McDonald's going to have more of a role. I see him having 1 rushing touchdown, and then Silver's having like a passing touchdown. So it's going to be a good one.
It's pretty fair. That's all of that seems fairly likely. This is a really tough game. This is a really tough game for me to pick. After what I saw out of St. Louis, granted it was against Vegas's defense, I personally think that this game is going to go to St. Louis as well. The way they came out last week, they impressed me quite a bit, especially with Aitman getting healthy now. That's a big, big win for them. I think that we're going to see them top 30 points in this game. I think it's going to be 31 to, let's go 24 on this one. I think it's going to be a close game separated by a score late. For anybody who did not tune in last week, just to give you a quick rundown of what our predictions were, Travis, sorry, I'm looking at this week again. My mistake. So, yeah, Travis had Seattle. Mark had Seattle. Michael had Houston. Chris had Houston. I had Houston as well. Travis had DC, St. Louis for Mark. Michael had St. Louis, DC for Krish, St. Louis for me as well. This is actually 2 weeks ago, I guess. I apologize. Vegas for Travis, Orlando for Mark, Vegas for the rest of us, Michael, Christian, myself. San Antonio for Travis, Arlington for Mark, San Antonio for myself, Arlington for Krish, and San Antonio for myself as well. So fairly close last week. But any final thoughts on this week before we get out of here, guys?
Sure. One thing I want to point out is a quarterback that I'm supposed to take a look at, Orlando, Arlington, anyone. His name is Dalton Sneed. He's from Montana State. He plays on the Bay Area Panthers of the IFL. He is an outdoor quarterback. So if you have a partnership with the IFL, I would take a look at him, to be honest. Billings with a big win tonight. I mean, they played a team that's going to fold within the next 2 weeks, probably, hopefully, for the league. And also, no offense, but like the team they played also was playing with a wide receiver at quarterback who threw 2 touchdowns. Shout out to him. It's going to be good. I want to see more players in and out. I want to see more guys getting cut. I want to see more guys getting signed because these teams rocking with the same guys week after week for teams, it's not working for some of these teams. So go out, make changes, sign guys, cut guys, end guys' careers. That's what this is about. So,
I'd like to see Quentin Flowers active again this week. I don't know why this past week he was inactive.
That was kind of an odd decision to me as well. I mean, personally, if it's me at this point, you go with Quentin Flowers as the number 2. You go with Dormandy as your number 1, and you get them both involved. I mean, Dormandy, I see not wanting to take him off the field, but I've said it before. You have the double forward pass. You have Quentin Flowers, who's kind of a quarterback running back hybrid. Put him in the same backfield. Throw defenses off. What do you have to lose? You're literally 0-6. You're not playing for anything at this point but pride. Do something, please, Orlando, please. But get Quentin Flowers involved, please. I mean, the state of Florida really wants him to be in that offense one way or another.
Even just do what DC does with Tiamo and King, right? I mean, it's the same concept.
Absolutely. Maybe having Quentin and Quentin active at the same time would be confusing on the sideline. I mean, it would for sure, but definitely ways to get around that, I'm sure. Any other last
pull out all the stops.
No doubt. Any other last thoughts, anybody? Nope. All right. I'm there as well. Everybody who joined us, thank you so much. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe. Again, help us get to that 750 mark by the XFL championship, and we'll help you get some brand new XFL gear for your favorite team if you're that lucky subscriber that wins. I'm going to leave you guys with a little bit of a explanation behind what we do here other than just talk XFL, USFL. So here's our little bit of a promotional commercial, you could say.
This is Brett, and you're watching Shady Sports Network. Tune in, hit that like button.
You might wonder, what do these guys do? Player signing announcements. I never in a million years thought you would actually come on to break this news. So without further ado, go ahead and tell everybody what happened today.
Yeah, man. I just had a workout with the Cincinnati Bengals. Signing me right out.
Without further ado, I'd like to announce that, I'll be taking my talents to Salina Liberty.
This just in. The Major League of Football is reportedly collapsing, unable to pay hotel room bills, with players being kicked out of their rooms and hotel managers asking them to leave voluntarily without issue.
And then we got Lions wide receiver Williams is debuting this week as a starter. That's something to look at as far as the eye test goes. And then another one on the eye test is Mostert. It might be coming back to Miami. And we can see if he has a role in this offense and see if he can be viable for the next couple weeks coming and help us in the playoffs and possibly towards a championship. That would be very nice because he's sitting on my bench right now.